All right. We're going to give it just a second while everybody logs in. Looks like we have several people who've been waiting anxiously for this webinar. We're so excited. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started real quick as everybody's logging in. Welcome everyone to our webinar Wednesday. We're very excited for today's topic. We'll be talking about true costs of waste. Stop throwing away your profits. Before we get started, though, I do have a few housekeeping items. So, Kim, thank you. We are obviously recording the webinar like we do every single time we have a webinar Wednesday. You are welcome to share the webinar or come back and revisit. You'll just go to our website at builderpartnerships.com and click on the events tab, and then go to the webinars, and you can watch this and many others anytime you like. We do take questions throughout the webinar, and you can ask us questions by going down to the bottom of your screen and clicking on the Q&A speech bubbles. So there's two speech bubbles with the letters Q&A under there. Click on that and you can go ahead and ask your question. We will be reserving all questions until the end. So I will read the questions out loud to Kim and Dave, and they will go ahead and answer your questions at the end. So make sure you stay on the webinar until the end to get your questions answered. We do also welcome any comments, suggestions. If you have any troubleshooting you need to do with your particular link into the webinar, you can reach me directly through the chat speech bubble down at the bottom of your screen. You can click on that and you can reach me directly. I can help you with any issues you might be having, whether you're struggling with sound or anything like that. I'm happy to help you out there. Go ahead, Kim, if you'll switch the slides. Our speakers today are Dave Burleigh, who many of you have heard before, and Kim Dickson is joining us today for her first time on a webinar Wednesday. We're very excited to have her as part of our team, and she and Dave have been working very hard on this webinar for the last couple of weeks. You can see here what their bios are, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask, but I'm going to go ahead and send it over to Kim to get us started. Thanks, Kim.
All right, good morning, everybody. All right, today's presentation, we're going to break waste into 3 different categories. We're going to talk about what a waste reduction plan looks like, and then ways we can reduce waste efficiently. Defining waste. Waste is defined as any material used that's over the minimum amount required to get the job done. When we break waste into 3 categories, we're going to talk about required waste, visible waste, and hidden waste. Your required waste is the material above the minimum amount required for the completion of the task, but suggested for best results. We all know that in construction, you have to calculate waste into some of your takeoffs, and that's going to be what your required waste is. For example, we have extra lumber to compensate for knots, twists, extra tile to compensate for your patterns, your perimeters, and then extra trim material. Can anybody have any other examples of what required waste might be? If you do, you can unmute yourself and speak up. Okay, some of the other examples might be granite, shingles, you're gonna have to factor in some waste for. The next one is gonna be your visible waste. That's the easiest of our waste categories to identify. It's easily the most frustrating waste that you're going to see. You've got your trash left around the job site that's got to be hauled off, your dumpsters overflowing. Then on top of the wasted goods, you've got the cost of hauling off that waste because that's not free. And it's also the waste we typically discuss when we're talking with our trade partners. The next one is going to be hidden waste. And that's what is normally forgotten, the stuff that's behind the sheetrock. It's also going to be what cost us the most money. Hidden waste is the waste that's left in the home upon completion, not easily seen. For example, extra framing material that wasn't required but was used is the most common form. Other things to think about are over-engineering, HVAC oversizing, all your sheetrock that's cut for convenience versus efficiency. Another good example is we once had an insulation company. offer to cut our prices if we could figure out how he could use less than 20 cans of polyseal in every house. What we didn't realize that our supers were no longer holding the mechanical trades to their scope of work, requiring them to seal their own overcuts. So this guy was using polyseal to fill in 2 to 3 inch holes in the RMAX. That's a waste we couldn't see, but we were paying for. So that's just, I mean, that's just another example of what some hidden waste that's going to be costing you money that you may not know about. Reducing waste is going to have an immediate impact on your profitability. What you want to look for, though, is if you go to reduce waste and your EPOs and your variance go up, then you haven't really reduced your waste. You just push the problem right down the line. All right, we're going to talk about a waste reduction plan. An effective waste reduction plan should include a documented purpose and process. Number one, what are we reducing? You can't just say we're going to reduce waste, because that's not a plan. You have to decide how you're going to reduce it. All right, if you don't figure out the how, then it's just a wish, not really a plan. Next, you have to have a deadline. If you don't set a deadline on when these reductions are going to appear on your POs, then you're never going to get it over the goal line. Next one is, what cost codes are you going to address? We'll talk later about which ones are going to give you the most bang for your buck. And then you have to say, how are you going to measure it? How are you going to monitor your success? What's measured improves, right? And then, why are we reducing? For me, a why is very important if you're going to get buy-in from your supers and from your trade partners, from everyone on your team. You have to have a why that you believe in. Okay, the first step of that action plan, what are we reducing? The first one we're going to look at is your required waste. I have just a very simple example for you. This kitchen here looks great, right? We have a nice countertop. We have tons of storage space. The problem here, though, is that you're not just paying for this granite right here. You're actually paying for all of that granite. And that's a lot of extra waste that you don't need. So my question is, wouldn't this be a better solution for that section of countertop? Now you're only paying for specifically what you need. I would typically take that a step farther, get rid of that section, make the island a little larger, and remove all that. But this is just a simple way to fix some waste that's currently required that you could do away with. Dave, any other suggestions on things you could do with this particular plan?
Yeah, so on this specific one, what we also want to watch is, on these big tops, is what's the weight of that top. As that weight increases with these really cool looking kitchen islands, is that they become heavier and heavier, which then we're not only worried about what's happening with the countertops, now I have to pay attention to what's happening with my floor system as well. I always like to stick to the rule of thumb of trying to keep islands to the size of a slab, because anytime that I start getting islands that are bigger than a slab of concrete, my waste is growing exponentially. In that version that you just showed a minute ago, Kim, that was, probably about a 30 to 40% waste in granite countertops, which is, especially if this is an inclusion in the home, that is a super high waste factor to just have that we're just giving away. Even if it's an option, I want to watch that waste closely, because I need to make sure that I'm factoring in the true cost of my granite, not just the part that can be seen.
All right, thank you, Dave. Okay, the next one is going to be, you're going to have to figure out exactly which hidden waste you want to try to reduce, and then which visible waste. Once again, if you just say, hey, we're just going to reduce all the visible waste, that's too broad, you can't measure it. So you have to get very specific with what your plan is. Okay, so how can we reduce waste? We've got numerous waste. First one is just 2D estimating. Most of us probably use digital estimating tools like PlanSwift, OnScreen. For these, you may want to double check your formulas, make sure there isn't too much waste being calculated into these. A newer solution is actual 3D modeling. This is going to give you precise takeoffs and leaves no question that everything is accounted for and there isn't too much waste. Another one is flooring cut sheets. If you don't have standardized floor breaks on your plans, then that's a huge opportunity for you to reduce some waste. Next one is specifications. You need clear and enforceable scopes that define who's responsible for your miscuts, damage, etc. If you don't have these, then you as the builder, you're going to always be left holding the bag. And that's not what we want. Once we've lined out what specifically we want to reduce and how, our natural instincts is say, let's do it now. We get excited, we get in a hurry, but this is not something you want to rush. If you do, you're dooming the whole thing to failure. So we want to take our time, make a good plan, and then we want to prioritize which cost codes and which areas we want to improve, and then roll those out several cost codes at a time, week by week, not all at one time, or it's too much. It's too much for people to review. It's too much for you to oversight. It's too much for everybody. So you want to break that down. And let's take a look at, we know not all cost codes are created equal. So let's look at our trades with the greatest waste impact. Number one, you've got lumber. If you use wall panels, I want to caution you that you can't assume wall panels don't have waste. You should verify the designs. Whoops, I'm sorry, guys. You should verify your designs because you're going to find the needed studs in the wall panels. If you use a lumber company to do your takeoffs, you're going to want to check them for excess lumber. Not to be cynical, but we all know the lumber companies aren't doing your takeoffs out of the kindness of their heart. They're making their money somewhere, so you're going to want to double check those and validate them. Your next one is concrete. We used to have a concrete guy where I came from that would send us variances, send us EPO requests for extra concrete because he set the forms on the driveway wider than what the plot plan called for. You want to make sure your scopes are written in such a way that you're only paying for what's on your plot plan. If he messes up and he does it larger, then he's covering that, not you. Otherwise, you're going to be losing a lot of money on concrete. Your next area is going to be your exterior, your masonry, siding, soffit, and fascia. And then you're going to look at your interior, your drywall, your trim, your countertops, like we talked about, and all your flooring. Okay. When we talk about reducing waste, we want to make sure we collaborate. We want to involve our trade and our superintendents with the plan. If we don't communicate with everyone and we just start reducing takeoffs and POs, then you're not going to have buy-in, and your super's just going to start issuing EPOs. Your trade's going to get frustrated. You're going to lose any trust you have between your purchasing department and the field, and you're just going to cause more problems. So we want to make sure we communicate with everyone up front. Everyone's on the same page and understands why we are doing what we're doing.
Yeah, so here, Kim, we also want to make sure that our trade partners understand what we're doing is reducing waste. It's going to feel to them like what we're doing is just trying to get lower cost, which ultimately that's part of what we're after. But more importantly is for them to understand we're not trying to pay you less per square foot or less per board or anything like that. What we are trying to do is reduce the amount of material that we're using, which yes, does include us saving a little bit of money, but we're also increasing your trade partners' efficiencies and having less material on site, less things that they need to move around, and giving them a more clear, concise plan on how to use the material properly.
Okay. And then once we've got our plan, we've talked to everybody, we roll it out, we're gonna have to monitor our success. Before we begin, we're gonna wanna have a system in place to monitor everything. You're gonna have to set goals and standards up front. If you don't, you're not gonna know whether you're being successful or not. And let's face it, if you don't see the results, then you feel like it's too much work, right? So we wanna come up with a system ahead of time. We don't wanna wing it afterwards. And then remember that our costs should go down. If our variances are going up, then we didn't really accomplish anything. That means we didn't really have buy-in. We didn't have everybody on the same page. So monitoring our success, things to look for, your extra cleans. You should start seeing a decrease in the number of extra haul-offs needed as you reduce waste. Your gross profit should increase. And then we should be soliciting feedback from our trade partners and our superintendents. And that's going to give us a good gauge on how successful we're being with reducing our actual waste. Let's look at the why. So we want to make sure we set our why up front. People are driven by their whys, and you're going to have much greater participation and support from everyone on the team if everyone understands the why. So let's look at some whys. It's not all about money. The most obvious reason is to keep costs down, not only for your profits, but so that you can attract more buyers. Reducing waste is going to give you a better house and a better home building experience. And then you also have your millennial buyers who place a huge importance on reducing waste and manufactured materials. This is something you could brag about. You know, you're using less lumber because you've gotten more efficient. People like to hear that. And then let's talk about, are your variances out of control? Are your estimates inconsistent? Where I came from when I stepped into purchasing, it was every estimator had his own way of doing it. I could give them all the same house and they would come up with 3 or 4 different estimates, different takeoffs. None of them were the same. Not a good way to run your business. You have to have some standards in place. So are your estimates inconsistent? Do your houses look like a lumber yard when you finish? That's probably the most painful experience from the purchasing side and also from the owner side as you drive by. If any of these problems sound familiar to you, we can help over here at Shinn. We offer 2D estimating services through PlanSwift. Why PlanSwift? This is what a majority of your major trade partners are going to use. So we want to align with them. If we use a different software, then we have to rebuild trust with them in a different system. So we want to use the same thing they're using. And it kind of just puts everybody on the same page. PlanSwift is great. We have all the tools built in for everything to make it easier. Everybody would be on the same page. You can export it into Excel and import straight into your system. So you're not rekeying takeoffs. We all know everybody fat fingers when you rekey stuff. So this kind of eliminates that problem for you. Everything is converted to your part numbers, your part descriptions and cost codes. So you don't have to redo anything in your system. It's not going to require work on your end. We can take care of all that on our end. Let's see. And then material manager is currently being integrated directly into PlanSwift for API connections. You'll be able to run any archived plan for specific community options, selections in just seconds. So if you say you're opening a new subdivision and you want to change the specs, you can run that and kind of see what that looks like with a push of a button. You don't have to guess. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's going to allow you to do that. Dave, is there anything you want to speak about on this?
Yes, I think the big thing to understand is the best way that we can reduce waste is to control our own estimates. We still have too many builders across the country that are either doing lump sum bid management, or they may be doing some turnkey. And even a lot of people that are doing unitized pricing, they're getting their quantities from their trade partner. To really own it and understand it and control the material usage, we need to control those quantities. The biggest benefit to the system that Chuck and the team built is that this system is a plug and play for every builder. So we can train your own team how to do these estimates. We can teach you how to use the tools. We can teach you how to use the material manager and really hone in and start to control not only how much material are you getting, but how is that material being utilized to make sure that we are being as efficient as possible. With the market sitting the way it's sitting today, every dollar we can scrape out of our home is a dollar that we need. And you will find that going through waste reduction programs is one of the fastest ways to quickly recoup dollars. It's dollars that we can recoup on work in progress. It's dollars we can save for future builds. Gives us a lot of opportunity. But to do that, we have to have a foundation of solid estimates, whether it's in 2D or 3D. But that's really where we need to start, is locking in what those quantities are for our materials.
Okay, thank you, Dave. The next one here is 3D frame modeling. You know, it's been around for a while. It was always kind of out of most people's grasp, not something we thought could easily be done. But it is probably what I am most excited about. we all realize our estimators aren't framers. And unless we can teach our estimators how every framer frames differently, then our takeoffs are never going to be 100% accurate. I remember sitting in with our estimators and talking about, we did one takeoff together, and he was like, I'm going to throw up these studs here, then I'm going to build a pony wall, and then I'm going to come off of that. And I said, how do you know your framer is going to frame it that way? How do you know he's not going to just take that 16-foot stud, throw it up there and cut it off? He goes, he just wouldn't. And I called our QC inspector and I said, hey, how's he going to frame this? He said, he's going to throw up that 16-foot stud and cut it off. Our takeoff is wrong every single time if we don't understand how our framer frames. So a good solution for that is this right here. It's going to show you, it's going to export everything just like everything else does into Excel. But this is what I love. How easy is this? Your builder no longer has to be a framing expert. Let's face it, most of them aren't. Your framer can't go, hey, you left out the lumber for this area. We know it's all accounted for. We know exactly what it's supposed to look like. And we know we have everything on the PO. With lumber being the largest cost in the house, I think that this is one of the best solutions that I personally have seen, in a way to minimize that cost and the extras that we see every day. Dave, you want to talk about this a little bit? Because I know this is kind of your baby here.
Yeah, so a couple things on 3D. First, what we're looking at here is a wall cut sheet for a specific wall within that home. What this allows us to do is to get the same efficiencies we get out of panel plants, similar efficiencies to what we get out of a ready frame or a pre-cut package. And it allows us to basically create a panel plant on our job site, where we can pre-cut our lumber, we can get the walls pre-assembled on site, ready to go, as well as we're actually showing our framers how we want it framed. We're taking out the framer 1 likes to frame this way and framer 2 likes to frame this way. We're saying that's great that you have the way that you want to do it, but this is the way we're actually going to frame the home. The second benefit to this is, as we're looking at it, we can start to play with different configurations. So I'm looking at these 2 windows that I have on the right side and saying, I can see that I have a stud that's just a matter of maybe 2 inches away from the start of my windows. Can I separate those windows a little bit, give a little bit more relief between them and eliminate a stud? I do the same thing if I'm looking at my floor systems, my roof trusses. It allows us to see instantly what happens if I make these minor changes. What happens if I shrink this room a couple of inches? Can I downsize on my floor joists? What happens if I move this window a little bit? What happens if I move this door? We can get those immediate feedbacks so that we can understand that we can make some design changes that are also going to make us more efficient and help reduce the amount of material that we need to use.
Awesome. Okay, so we can help with that. If you've got more questions on 3D frame modeling or even the 2D estimating, here's some contact information for you. And then I think we're ready for questions and answers, Emma.
Excellent. Well, we have Randy who's had a few comments to share through the webinar, but his most recent question is he's wanting to know if you guys meet with the framer, him, and the supplier.
We do. So specifically when we're doing the 3D frame modeling, we initially, Randy, we would ask you, who's your number 1 framer? We want your framer that you believe is the best one that you have. And that's who we want to start the process with, the person that you trust. And what we do is we'll work together hand in hand with the framer, mainly to find out what are the practices in your marketplace. We frame homes differently throughout the country. Hopefully Kim doesn't give me a really dirty look, but we frame basically correctly for the market in every place but Texas. They just frame the way Texas frames. But we want to talk to your framer. We want to understand what their practices are, and then we want to talk through any inefficiencies that we see there. So just because your framer does it that way doesn't mean we're going to necessarily say that's the way it's going to be. Once we get through and get eye to eye with your framer and your framer's happy with that design, then we're going to bring in whoever your #1 lumberyard is to also have those same discussions with them to make sure that they understand why we're doing what we're doing and get that buy-in of understanding that yes, your framing package is going to go down by doing this, but there's still efficiencies for them as well. We're not worried about all these hot shot deliveries. We're not worried about coming and picking up all kinds of extra material. We want to walk them through the entire house wall by wall with them as well to understand when you get that purchase order, the numbers you're seeing are because this is what's actually required to build the home. And here's the allowable waste that we factored in so that they can feel comfortable with knowing, send that order the way it was requested and they'll be fine and covered.
You got a thumbs up on that. So I think you got Randy's question answered.
I was just reading through all of Randy's comments. I want to read one of them because I think it was the best one I saw is you can't build the house with emails and texts. Very critical when we do a purchase order system. So when you go to unitized pricing and now your lumber package is individual parts and pieces, that purchase order becomes your contract. And once we have that PO out, then that's how we're contracting that this is what we need you to deliver. It's the preferred method to go. If we rewind 10 years ago, 15 years ago, not many builders were doing purchase orders unitized. As we've continued through time, it's picked up speed. Every major market now, it's really taken hold where it's not as foreign of a concept anymore. So it's a lot easier to have these conversations with the trade partners and explain we're going to switch over to unitized pricing. These are the goals of why we're doing it. And it's not going to be something that's catching people off guard like it would have a few years ago.
So Mark has a question and then Randy has another one. Well, maybe it might be, I'm a fee builder and I have to deal with change orders via emails and text. It is BS. All right. So then Mark has a question. Is it feasible for a custom builder to do 3D? It's a no-brainer for a subdivision builder to get their plans perfect before they start. But wouldn't it be cost prohibitive for a custom guy?
I would say no, it's not going to be cost prohibitive. In full disclosure, when you see the cost of 3D, it's very common to have a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction. Imogen and I send these proposals out all the time, and I think we both still have knee-jerk reactions. But the reality is, especially in the custom market, what you're going to save by modeling that home correctly and ordering the materials based off of the model, you're going to save more than you're going to spend in getting that done. There's certainly also opportunities to be trained to be able to do that yourself long term, so that you don't have that same cost of a third-party service long term. You get trained up, learn how to do that properly, go through the same processes with us of meeting with the framers, meeting with your suppliers, getting everything locked in, and then long term you're able to produce those yourself at a lower cost than using a typical third-party service.
Yeah. And Dave, can I speak up on that too? I'm getting ready to personally build a house, and I've gotten all my estimates back from the lumber companies and from elsewhere, and I am having Dave do the 3D modeling for me for just this one-off house. And it not only allows me to visualize it versus just being on a piece of paper, but based on the numbers I have, I think it's going to save me a small fortune in lumber. And I would be happy to kind of share that with you behind the scenes if you would like later, kind of show you what that difference looks like But for me, if I can save money on the lumber, just comparatively more than what I'm going to spend, then it's worth it for me.
Well, then you get to see what your house looks like before you actually build it.
Well, and I think, you know, where I come from, we did acre products that were full custom. And I said for a long time, I think our buyers would even pay for that, to be able to see it before it's built. And that way, if they want to make a change, you would rather them do it now versus once it's all framed up.
Yeah, and one thing I'd like to add is so the purpose of the 3D model really is for framing. That's what we're focusing in on. But on top of the framing, we're also getting the exteriors actually planned out correctly and getting actual usages. The same thing is happening for drywall, for insulation, for any concrete slabs, footings and foundations, roofing material. There's a lot of other things that we're not really focusing on, but we're happy to get as a byproduct. So we're not shooting, the overall savings isn't just for lumber. The savings bleeds out into other cost codes. It just happens to be that our hot button focus is on the lumber side of it.
Another thing, Dave, just we've worked with custom home builders for a long time. One custom home builder was in Seattle, and he had an internal architectural department. They would not go to 3D. They would not go to intelligent CAD, but the purchasing department did. And the purchase department did 3D and they did intelligent CAD so that they could get the right materials. The other thing is, if you want to get rid of change orders and custom home building, go to 3D modeling. You'll get rid of a ton of change orders in the process by showing that with sharing that with the customer as you go through.
Mark had a follow-up question. He said, that's awesome. Is there a 3D modeling software that you can recommend?
Yep. So the one that we use is SketchUp, actually. We use SketchUp, and there's available plugins to handle the framing aspect of it. And we have found that for ease of use and the ability to quickly get someone up to speed to use it, that's the best one on the market today.
Excellent, thank you. We have Jim who wants to know if he can we import our frame engineering designs into the 3D model? As an estimator that has spent years framing in Central Texas, it is truly different.
Yep, so as long as that model is a CAD file, it can be imported in. You do still have to utilize the tools within SketchUp to fully model it and get all the material out of it. But it certainly saves a ton of time and gives you that visual reference to make sure that you've that what you have designed matches the design that you were given. Then we're going to caution, though, that once that's done, then we want to start tweaking it and see if was it designed properly, or was there possibly some over engineering in that design, which is very common, and see what we can do to start reducing some of that extra material. And that was a great question, because in Texas, where it's mainly stick framed roofs, you can 3D model a stick framed roof, you can 3D model a truss roof. We generally see that the most efficient method, even if you're on trusses, is there's probably sections of your home that would be more beneficial to not truss. Right. When we get into a lot of these little sheds and little overhangs at porches and things like this, very expensive trusses, because there's a ton of material in those little areas, where we could just as easily stick frame it and drastically reduce the amount of material required.
Yeah, and the framers like it, to be able to, as opposed to dealing with those little teeny trusses.
I don't have any more questions. We can read some of Randy's comments out loud. I think that everybody can see the question.
So I was actually just reading one of Randy's that's spot on. Randy's getting a gold star for the class. I'm just going to say that right now. So yes, when we're doing a 3D model, what we really like to do is we want to find a house that you're going to be framing in the coming weeks. And that's the one that we want to model. Because then we're going to use that to train the framer. How are we actually going to frame this home? And then we're going to have you with FaceTime or video record it or do a Matterport. There's 9 million virtual ways to get this done. We want to walk that house with you comparative to the model to find out where did we miss the mark? Where did the framer do something that wasn't required to do, or what the framer find a problem that it did need an on-site fix to the issue that then needs to be modeled accordingly to make sure that we're capturing that moving forward.
Excellent. Well, that is it for questions. Unless anybody else has another question they want to pop in really quick, you can raise your hand, or Randy says beautiful. I feel like we should have a beer with Randy after this.
Imogen, this is Chuck.
Yep.
Let me
ahead,
make
Dad.
a comment about why this is important and why it's important to sell it and how to sell it to your trades. With the interest rates and what's happened in the market, we've had about a 25% drop across the country in sales in the last, and it's been continually dropping for the last 6 months. But one of the problems is the monthly payment. If I look at the monthly payment from a 3% mortgage to a 6% mortgage for about a $500,000 house, my monthly payment just increased $1,000. That kills the affordability for your customers. And that's really the important thing. The sales price of the house is not as important as how much do I have to pay every month. So I got $1,000 somewhere along the line. I got to reduce their monthly payment by $1,000 or some piece of that $1,000. And some of the things that my builders are doing right now is they're giving a $10,000 benefit to the customer to buy down the mortgage. That'll buy down about 0.75% on the mortgage. But the other thing is I got to reduce the sales price of my house. And that means, what am I going to do? Am I going to go beat up my trades? Am I going to go beat up my superintendent? What am I going to do? Well, the first thing you need to do is go after your waste. And like Kim said, there's three pieces of waste. But part of it also is the waste that Dave was talking about, the hidden waste that you've got in your structure and with your trades, and also the needed waste of the extra studs, the extra flooring, the extra carpet, the extra roofing material, and so forth. Well, one of the things that you can do is, and when you meet with the trades, to say, look, we got to save so many dollars. Come up with a number that you need to reduce your direct construction cost or their piece of the direct construction cost. You say, look, we've got the $10,000. We're buying down a mortgage. We've gone through and we've looked at the product and we've value engineered the product, but we need to come in and this is how much we still need to get the cost down. And if you can come in with ideas on how to reduce the cost, I will reduce the sales price dollar for dollar for the savings that we get from the team. And I got 35 trades that I'm sitting with. You guys come up with ideas and I will give dollar for dollar a reduction on the sales price to get us down to where the monthly payment is back in line with where we can get our customers back in, and I'm saving your job and I'm saving the company by doing this. That is a good way of selling the idea. Say, I'm not going after your profits. What I'm trying to do is to make us more efficient. And we're going to pass that along to the customer. So, and I've had builders do that and they actually grow in a down market. The other thing is your margins grow, because I didn't take any of the margin dollars out of the deal. So my house went from 500 to 475. That did nothing but increase my percentage profitability or my percentage margin on that house by reducing the sales price. So I can have a win-win-win situation and doing the kind of stuff that Kim and Dave were talking about in the program. I don't know if either one of you want to.
Can I
chime
chime in? Because I think it's important, you know, in my previous position, we had a trade council. And once a month, we had 30 vendors come in and they sat with us side by side. And they come to us with ideas on how to reduce waste. And they went to each other. I mean, we had our lumber company save our stair guy 10% with a solution. I mean, they're willing to help each other and to help us if you're willing to ask the hard questions. And it builds a team like none other, guys. If you can get their input and their feedback, they're willing and ready to help you cut cost.
Yeah.
And that makes them more successful. So, I mean, I encourage you, if you don't have a trade council, get something like that set up so that you can get that feedback and you can benefit from that.
We have another question. Andy wants to know, are people using different waste percentages for different areas of framing specifically, like 5% for walls, 8% for exterior and roof sheathing, depending on pitch and complexity and so on?
So they should be, yes. I actually challenge to go a level deeper than that. We manage our waste factors by SKU. So it's not just everything in the walls is 5%. We may run a different waste factor on plate material than we do studs, than we do blocking. I really challenge people to think of waste all the way down to a product line. Not even just saying, you know, unfortunately, it's very common, like in roofing, we hear, oh, my waste factor is 10%. Well, that's great, except there's a lot of different components that go into that. Some of them don't really deserve a waste factor at all because you're buying in bundles or you're buying in boxes or pails, and you have a good amount of natural waste already built into that. So we really do challenge across the board, really look at it from a line item by line item and assign the appropriate waste for each item.
And you got an amen on that one from Randy.
I'm telling you, Randy's my new best friend. We're going to be vacationing together very soon.
We have another question. How can accounting and finance team assist the field in waste reduction?
So the biggest thing for me, where they chime in if you don't have an ERP that can help you do it, is we really need them to be tracking what's happening through variances, through extra purchase orders, through purchase order adjustments or incremental POs. I want them to give that feedback of where am I blowing my budget? Because if I'm blowing my budget, that means something is wrong. Unfortunately, we typically assume if something is wrong, it's in the estimate. That's not necessarily the case. The estimate may still be spot on, but if we haven't communicated how to use material correctly, or we haven't communicated who's responsible for miscuts, for misuse, for footings that are dug too wide or too deep, if we haven't communicated these things, then we're on the hook for all those things. I've always, even in great ERPs, really leaned on my accounting teams to help me with WIP, to help me quickly resolve, if I do this today and do it moving forward on every home, how is that going to impact work that's already in progress? And how much savings can I actually realize rather than just looking at new starts? I really want that financial oversight into how is it affecting anything that's already out there that we could still rein in and get under control before that cost code hits.
Another area of control is the Home Depot credit cards.
Let's see, we have, Jim says, I have waste figured for each level plate studs and each item because the waste for sheet siding as opposed to lap. So I think that was a comment based on your answer earlier. Mark, is there a good way to scale into this? We are a fairly small team. Could we pay you to help with some of this until we can bring on more people to help with some of these items?
Yep. So Mark, that's typical for most builders that we work with. Is we absolutely would love to be your resource as we get you built up, trained up, and slowly hand off when it's comfortable for you to hand off. We also do like to scale UPM by hitting the big cost codes first. So if we say, hey, let's go UPM across the board, that's a huge undertaking from an estimating side, from a data management side, to a verification side, to training, to all the communication that needs to happen. So we definitely like to say, let's start with the top, 5 to 7 heavy hitting trades, get this implemented for them, and then let's go find the next 5 to 7 and work through so that your entire plan library is framed with UPM before we move to another cost code and get the entire library brought up to speed in that next cost code and just pick them off in little chunks.
Excellent. Thank you. Randy says communication, they need to know what's been sent back detailed and when, so they can look for and confirm appropriate credits. So then I've got one more question. What ERP have you found the best for monitoring variances and purchase orders, both field use and office use?
So I feel like Mark Systems does a good job with this. Easy to see what our variances are. Kova does really well at this. Kim, I know you've used some other ERPs. I don't know what your views were on variances there as well.
Yeah, what we used was not real user friendly.
Okay.
Kova would probably be the best suggestion in my opinion.
So I would say beyond what the system, because we have a lot of ERPs, I'm sure, represented in this call. Some are good at variances, others may not be so strong with it. There's also just a communication issue a lot of times. If my field builder is getting ready to write a bunch of variances, it's not unreasonable for me to say, hey, could you give me a call first and let's talk about those? We can use just personal communication to bridge the gap if our ERP system is struggling on the variance side. Then we can have those conversations to make sure that we're understanding, is this really a variance? Is this really a variance because of a estimate issue? Is this a variance because we were short delivered? Is this a variance because something was used incorrectly? I believe that the builders, the purchasing teams, and the estimating teams really have to work in unison together on the variances to get them under control. If we try to do those in silos, they're never going to get under control. We have to work together to identify what's the cause and what's the solution.
Yeah.
Excellent. Oh, one more. Robert wants to know, as a production builder, we found that our punch out costs were out of control. So we did cancel our Home Depot cards and now also prepare a punch out supply kit for each home and require staff to explain why they need extra materials for a specific home. Seems to be working.
So Robert, I'm seeing this more consistently now across the country, and I think it's a brilliant idea. I'm seeing a lot more ERPs that we work in that we are creating punch out lists. There is a purchase order that specifically says this is what we're supplying for punch out, and does require then that oversight if additional materials or supplies are needed. And I absolutely commend you that someone can't just run to Home Depot and buy what they need and let it fly under the radar. For everyone else on the call, I would strongly suggest considering that same process where, and it's not the same list for every home for most people. Usually that list varies home to home, but that can be pre-solved, pre-purchased on a purchase order, and then monitored from there to know if we're using things above and beyond what was on the pre-approved list.
The other thing is to make sure your superintendents are enforcing the scopes of work for the trades. Because most of the punch out stuff is stuff the trade should have been doing.
Yeah, and so to piggyback on something Kim said a little bit earlier, it's another area where trade councils come in very well. Is you may have your painter constantly complaining to you about having to do touch up. You're going to get much more mileage out of your painter being able to sit right in front of your appliance guy and say, would you guys please stop knocking holes in the wall? Would you please stop doing this? Your granite guy being able to tell your plumbing contractor, every time you slam your bag down on my countertop, I have to come fill it in. I have to come repair it. Trade councils are great for that. It allows those trades to build those relationships together with you just in an oversight capacity, and forces them into having those conversations together and finding resolutions when they understand how this is impacting trades before or after them.
That's it. There's no more questions.
Perfect.
All right.
We had a good run on questions today. If you have additional questions, oh, Randy has one more comment. We build 10 to $1 million plus. We build 10 $1 million plus homes a year, and punch out is actually ridiculous. I have to manage it personally so it doesn't get out of hand. Oh. Well, if anybody has questions, if you're watching the recording and you have some questions based on what you heard here today, you can reach Kim or Dave. Kim is at kim@shinnconsulting.com. That's Shinn with 2 N's. And Dave is Dave B as in boy, or for Dave Burleigh, at shinnconsulting.com as well. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. It has been a pleasure to have conversation, even though it was through you guys typing and us talking. We enjoyed every minute of it, and hope you have a great day. Oh, Dave wants to say he's looking for to hire a new purchasing and estimating team member in Sarasota, Florida, if anyone knows one. Well, now it's on the recording, so if anybody knows one, talk to David Hounahan. Hope you have a great day, everybody. We look forward to seeing you at the next webinar Wednesday. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.